On this edition of Good Day DePaul, DePaul fires its men's basketball coach, Tony Stubblefield.
Turmoil on college campuses. Students protest the Israel-Hamas war.
And election 2024, the race for presidency begins. I'm Lena Gebhardt.
And I'm Michaela Wilson, and this is Good Day DePaul.
A major development in the DePaul men's basketball program. Head coach Tony Stubblefield has been fired. This after Stubblefield went 28-54 in 2+ seasons and 3-15 so far this year. He'll be replaced on an interim basis by Matt Brady, who's been a special assistant to Stubblefield. DePaul Athletic Director Dwayne Peavy said he made the move after evaluating the current state of the basketball program.
I never envisioned an opportunity where we're standing here today and talking about us being 3-15, but also how we have done it and the way we're losing games. When we made this hire, we did so intending to play basketball late into March. That goal hasn't changed, and I am not backing down from that. After evaluating the current state of our men's basketball program, I decided to make a change in the head coaching position. A midseason change is not a decision I took lightly. Like our fans, I get frustrated when our results don't match our expectations. But the key for me is to ensure continuity and stability within this program.
Peavy says DePaul will immediately begin a national search for a new coach.
The war between Israel and Hamas continues to wreak havoc throughout the world. And as I found out, it's impacting college campuses.
Over 100 days of conflict, leaving nearly 2 million people displaced, thousands of homes destroyed, and nearly 24,000 dead. The Israel-Hamas war erupted on October 7th, and its impact has spread throughout the world. In this country, there's been protest and turmoil on many college campuses. In mid-November, the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights opened investigations into alleged anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents at U.S. colleges and universities. The investigations involved alleged violations of Title IV of the Civil Rights Act. The act prohibits discrimination based on race or national origin. Meanwhile, university leaders are struggling to balance free speech with student concerns that protest language is promoting violence.
It's important that, as a university, that you err on the side of free speech, or let me phrase this, that you don't do things that are going to actively stifle free speech. But you also want to, to ensure that speech, when it is carried out, is done in a manner that's respectful and civil.
A pro-Palestinian campus group, Students for Justice in Palestine, has been suspended from at least 4 universities in the past few months. These include Columbia, Brandeis, George Washington, and Rutgers. The universities accuse the group of disrupting classes and intimidating students. A handful of other schools have shut down student groups and disciplined students for speaking out. Some alumni at various universities have started do not hire lists that include the names of students who've been involved in some of the protests. And in some cases, outside university groups have also published negative information about students online. The result of all of this is that some students are afraid to protest due to concerns for their professional future and personal safety on campus. A Muslim DePaul student who asked to remain anonymous for privacy reasons said there was a specific instance on campus when she felt unsafe due to the current conflict in the Middle East.
One instance that comes to mind is I was walking on the Lincoln Park campus, and it was after one of the protests, and I was wearing a kufiya, which is a traditional Palestinian scarf, and someone actually spit on me. It was a very disturbing experience. They called me a terrorist, and it was really disturbing just to experience that. I know that I'm not alone. Several students on both sides have experienced similar kind of awful experiences.
Danielle Savelikovskaya is the co-president of a Jewish group, DePaul Chabad. She spoke about an incident that a member of her executive board experienced.
And we have people on e-board who have told us they've overheard a conversation that somebody's Jewish and someone's come up to them and said, oh, then you're a genocide lover, just because she was Jewish. And she doesn't say her stance or what she believes or anything, but solely because the person overheard she was Jewish, she was called a genocide lover.
DePaul's president, Robert Manuel, released a statement to Good Day DePaul saying that, in this difficult time, I reaffirm our support for all members of our university community. In particular, I want our Jewish and Muslim students to know we will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that we remain a safe, nurturing space for all. Although the university is saying they're striving to keep students safe, some students feel that more needs to be done.
In terms of safety, I would say that I don't think much is being done at all. I don't think there are any shifts in what we've had since earlier this year when there were lots of robberies on campus. I don't think there's been a specific focus from the university regarding safety of students from both Muslim and Jewish backgrounds.
The co-president of DePaul Chabad, Danny Schwartzman, thinks the university is making some small strides in supporting and protecting students.
Today we found out that like a bunch of the things that we were talking to them about, like for example, reporting not even just anti-Semitic hate crime, but also Islamophobic hate crime as well. Like now there's a way to report that, which is super, super big, even though it seems like such a small thing.
Support for Muslim and Jewish communities from university administration has not only been a concern for DePaul students, but for many across the country. A congressional hearing by the Republican House back in early December provoked severe backlash and repercussions to 3 elite university presidents. Claudine Gay of Harvard, Sally Kornbluth of MIT, and Elizabeth McGill of the University of Pennsylvania appeared at a hearing on Capitol Hill to speak about university governance during a crisis. All 3 said they were horrified by anti-Semitism and were taking action against it on campus. But then, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik asked them if calling for the genocide of Jews violates their university's rules on bullying and harassment. Many felt their responses were somewhat guarded and legalistic as they mentioned free speech concerns. To many Jewish students, alumni, and donors, their answers failed to meet a political moment by not clearly and forcefully speaking against anti-Semitism. In the following weeks, under tremendous pressure, Presidents Gay and McGill announced their resignations. The entire controversy underscores the pressures facing college administrators.
Universities are committed to free exchange of ideas. They're committed to free speech. They're committed to the rights of students to protest. And that conflicts with, the corresponding obligation to protect all students on campus. And so the conundrum is that in responding to the protest in the aftermath of October 7th, university administrators are in some respects forced to choose sides between your Palestinian students or your students, supportive or critical of the Israeli policies and those that are supportive of it. And it's a really untenable position, and they're getting all kinds of pressure from outside, outside groups, donors, what have you.
As the Israel-Hamas war continues in Gaza, protests are still occurring on American campuses. Protests that show no sign of ending. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Michaela Wilson.
We're now well into election 2024, with Republican primaries and caucuses taking place throughout the country, and Donald Trump continues to be the clear leader. Good Day DePaul's Will Frankel was recently at the Iowa caucuses and talked to voters about Trump.
Former President Trump was the clear winner of the Iowa caucuses and the frontrunner for the Republican nomination.
We want to thank the great people of Iowa. Thank you. We love you all.
Here in Mount Vernon, Iowa, Trump supporters talked about why they support him.
People didn't mess with America when he was president. They just didn't. We didn't have all these outside threats really knocking on our door the way we do now.
You can tell that he loves America. Like he loves the business and the economics and loves how America tries to work and function. I love that he cares.
Megan Goldberg, a political science professor at Cornell College in Iowa, says Trump's charisma is a key to his success.
Most people are not really ideologically consistent, but we have really, really strong social attachments to both parties and to candidates. And so part of Trump's support is a really strong social connection to him that people feel.
Trump is also popular among evangelical Christians.
There's a really, really well-organized, well-oiled infrastructure for Christian organizations, for Christian churches to sort of like disseminate this message. And so you get this alignment of language from the Trump campaign down to like churches.
Still, some Republicans who voted for Trump in 2016 or 2020 now support other candidates.
Well, I would say that I'm probably caucusing for Haley because I can't stand Trump. So if there was a Democratic caucus, I might well be over at that caucus.
There are many primary elections before the Republican nomination this summer.
Trump has proven to be successful with his campaign here in Iowa. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Will Frankel.
One of the big issues among Iowa voters was immigration. Good Day DePaul's Hannah Lopez was also in Iowa and has this report.
After campaigning in all of Iowa's 99 counties, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held an event in Davenport. The subject, immigration. His wife Casey summarized his position.
And that is what we need now at this moment in our nation's history more than anything else. Somebody who has the courage and the strength to stand up for what we want as Republicans. We have to shut the border.
Just a few days later, after finishing second in the Iowa caucuses, DeSantis ended his campaign. In May of last year, DeSantis signed a bill in Florida, claiming it to be the strongest anti-immigration legislation in the country to combat the crisis at the southern border. That legislation was supported by many Republicans, including Texas Congressman Chip Roy.
I think what it proves is that if you stand up and do the right thing, you stand up on the issues people believe in, that skin color and nationality doesn't matter, right? People want the rule of law. People want their country to be preserved and protected.
At the start of his presidential campaign, DeSantis called for a crackdown on illegal immigration. He proposed sending the U.S. military to the border and detaining and deporting undocumented people. He also sent a plane load of migrants to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts.
I've not had one Republican voter tell me that that's what they want. They want the border shut down. They want to stop the invasion. They want to deport illegal aliens who are here in our country. They want to make sure that we hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable. So these guys aren't following through on what they campaign on. With me, if I tell you I'm going to do it, you take it to the bank, we're going to do it.
California. Even for some young voters, immigration is an issue they would like to see addressed.
Definitely abortion, immigration as well, and pretty much like healthcare as well is a really big one.
But for some immigrants like Sandra Lopez, it hurts to hear the criticism from candidates like DeSantis and former President Trump.
Yo soy mexicana.
I'm Mexican. My uncles have a business here in Iowa, and the only thing I do want to say is that I feel very disappointed and sad about the comments that Trump has been making, because we work very hard, not only in Iowa, but also in all of the U.S. There's a lot of immigrants. I feel very sad that he doesn't appreciate us as Latinos in this country. Therefore, I don't agree with his comment. As Republican voters cast their ballots in Mount Vernon, immigration issues are still a concern for many. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Hannah Lopez.
During this election, the votes of young people may be crucial. I was also a part of the Good Day DePaul team in Iowa and talked to some students about the issues that matter to them and the candidates they support. We're here at the Nikki Haley event where young voters are sharing their thoughts about the upcoming election.
I think it's important for any young people in America to be politically active and stay informed because they're deciding the fate of their country, and I think that's one of the greatest strengths of the country.
How do you think political leaders can better engage with the youth?
That's a good question, but I don't really know because a lot of them are just so old that it's kind of, how are you going to engage when you're so old? But I think a lot of people I've seen now have done a lot of internet stuff, which I think is a good way. Personally, I don't feel as connected to it, but I feel like that might be a good way to contact young voters.
Here in Iowa, targeting the youth vote has not been a top campaign priority for some Republican candidates, like former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both of whom have taken their campaigns all across the state, a state that's home to several public and private universities. From Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, political science professor Dr. Megan Goldberg explains why.
Republicans aren't quite as focused on the young voters. And it's also really, really hard to get them to turn out. So, if you think about being a college student, for example, do you have 3 hours to spend on a weeknight, 3 or 4 hours to go caucus? And we usually do have really good student turnout, but we also have the benefit in Mount Vernon of our caucus locations are usually walkable. sometimes they are on campus, and even then, it's still a huge commitment. There's also, if you're thinking about sort of that same age demographic, but if you're not in college, you might be working a job that has evening hours, and they don't close during the caucus, and so it's really, really hard to get to it.
Citing mental health and other social issues as important to her going into the election season, Savannah Scheffler, a Cornell College student who spent her summer doing research about engaging youth and young voters, says many young people want to change from the older candidates.
It seems like we're getting tired of what's going on and having older people make these decisions that we want to be more active. And I do know there's a representative in Iowa City who's very young, and he won. And so that, I think, especially in Iowa, at Cornell and outside of Cornell, we're really excited to see a younger person as representative.
Of the Republican candidates running for president, DeSantis at 45 is the youngest, followed by Haley, 52, and former President Trump, 77. Meanwhile, student Benson Fang had some advice for students looking to be more politically active.
I think the biggest thing I would say is do your research. I know people say vote, get involved, but I think it's better to not make a decision than to make an ill-informed decision. Especially with the rise of social media, I see so many of my peers sometimes subscribing to false information or information that it might not be complete, and I feel like that's the most important thing that our generation, and as well as any generation, needs, is to stay informed with the wealth of information that's now available thanks to the internet.
Although caucus turnout was challenged by freezing temperatures and icy conditions, some young voters here in Iowa, like Mount Vernon resident and first-time voter Joyce Dowd, still came out to support her candidate, former President Trump. But she also was concerned with the age issue.
Respectfully, we have a lot of very old people in our government. I feel like if we had more young people out here, we could get more of what is relevant right now, problem solved. Probably money, a lot to do with money, economy, living. The gas prices. Gas prices are very big. And probably social issues as well, with like LGBTQ, etc., race and all that.
Kyle Telecki, a volunteer at the Iowa caucus and longtime caucus goer, explained why it's been encouraging to see young voters such as Dade continue to participate in the voting process.
I'm encouraged anytime a young person comes. Obviously tonight we're battling a lot of different things, the weather and that kind of thing. But we had, I don't know what the number was, but we had a number of young people, and I think it's fun to see their energy. The young man who got up and spoke for his candidate is a college student, and he's in that, that next coming up generation that's going to be influential. And obviously that's what you guys are doing too. And it's great to hear those young voices.
Reporting from Iowa for Good Day DePaul, I'm Lena Gebhardt.
Coming up in sports, more on the firing of DePaul men's basketball coach Tony Stubblefield.
And a look back at the women's soccer season. Those stories and more when we return.
2004 Skateboard Championship.
High school, moped.
How about you, Slim? Anything?
Something.
Looks like Slim's got a little paper cut.
It's nothing.
Come on, man. You know I'm gonna make you tell me.
Hey, kidney transplant.
When, dude? I didn't know you were sick.
I was donating it.
Someone in your family?
You gave your kidney to a complete stranger?
Yeah, saved his life.
Wow. All right. Everyone can save a life by being a living organ donor on matchingdonors.com.
A long and bitter strike is finally over at Columbia College in Chicago. Last month, adjunct instructors at Columbia approved a 4-year contract, ending a 49-day strike. The agreement restores some classes that were going to be eliminated, makes improvements in job security, and adds healthcare benefits for many adjuncts.
The recent cold wave in Chicago caused some problems at a DePaul residence hall. On January 16th and 17th, 2 frozen water pipe issues led to water spreading on some floors at McCabe Hall on the Lincoln Park campus. 16 students were temporarily displaced from their rooms. 14 of them went to other rooms on campus, while 2 stayed off campus. The problem has now been fixed.
Some positive enrollment numbers for DePaul. The university is reporting that winter quarter enrollment is more than 400 students higher than last winter. DePaul officials say this is due to growth in both undergraduate and graduate programs.
The dean of the DePaul Law School, Jennifer Rosada Perea, is stepping down. Perea will become the managing director of accreditation and legal education for the American Bar Association. The university is now conducting a search for her successor.
It's called FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It tells college students how much financial aid they will be receiving in the coming school year. It normally can be filled out at the beginning of October, but this year it was not available until December 30th. That's because the application was being redesigned to streamline the form and make more low-income students eligible for Pell Grants. But even then, the form was only available on an intermittent basis. Now, the government says it's available full-time, and all students should be able to move ahead with applying for their loans.
As we told you earlier, a team of Good Day DePaul reporters was recently at the Iowa caucuses. I was a part of that team and saw how the caucuses are a unique and different part of the election process. Here in Mount Vernon, Iowa, and all across the state, blizzard-like conditions and cold deterred some voters, but couldn't stop an important display of democracy from happening.
03, DeSantis. 04, Haley.
For decades, and per Iowa law, caucuses are held every 2 years during the midterm and presidential election seasons. Over 1,000 individual and county-based caucuses take place across the state at various locations such as churches and schools. The Iowa caucus is the first and most intimate contest in the presidential nomination process. Voters like Richard Jensen can participate by both expressing their thoughts and casting ballots in support of their candidate.
And I've thought to myself more than a time or two, is this the best we can do? If so, we're in trouble. We need to make a change. But I can tell you a new generation is necessary, because I want someone in that White House that will live with the consequences of their decisions for the next 20 or 30 years. And, as I said, I would like to see that person be a Republican. There's one candidate that's on our ballot here tonight that will be able to take votes away from Joe Biden. Nikki Haley is that candidate.
Republican caucus goers at locations such as Mount Vernon Community High School saw candidates like former President Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley on their ballots. The nature of the Iowa caucuses has generated widespread media attention and become a targeted aspect of presidential campaigns. At Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, Dr. Megan Goldberg, a political science professor, explains why the Iowa caucuses are unique.
Yeah, so I think one thing about Iowa going first is that it's this like flyover rural state that doesn't feel like it gets a lot of attention elsewhere. And so you get these like really interesting moments in the campaign of like the state fair and these visuals of candidates like at farms. And I think for a lot of people, this feels like a real America sort of moment, even though most Americans don't live in this sort of setting. Iowa's a really small state, and most Americans don't live in rural areas. But you're also getting candidates who aren't necessarily from a state like this, or from sort of like the same cultural background, and you're putting them in this context. And so, I mean, there's great moments that are like fictional in sort of political television shows, but they're not that different from reality in terms of when you're taking like a candidate who is perhaps wealthy or grew up in a city and is Ivy League educated, and then they have to like go figure out how to interact with a butter cow at the Iowa State Fair. I think that's what like puts this focal point.
While the Iowa caucuses are not always an indicator of how successful a presidential candidate will be in the primary or general elections, the caucuses remain an important aspect of the campaigning process and the Iowa culture. Those who aren't from Iowa might ask, why Iowa? Kyle Telecki, a volunteer who's been caucusing for over 30 years, explains its appeal.
I think the interesting thing is a lot of times people say, why Iowa? And Iowa doesn't always end up choosing the president. I think the process is more about narrowing down the candidates than it is necessarily picking who the next candidate is going to be for the president. And I think that really helps the nation because we get to be the first people to vet them.
Voters in Iowa are the first in the nation to impact the presidential election. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Lena Gebhardt.
Now, a brief look at DePaul sports. As reported at the top of the newscast, DePaul men's basketball coach Tony Stubblefield has been fired. In his final game, the Blue Demons lost to Butler 74-60. DePaul is now 0-7 in the Big East and 3-15 overall.
In women's basketball, DePaul lost to Connecticut 81-58. The Blue Demons are now 2-5 in the Big East and 10-10 on the season.
Some honors for the DePaul volleyball program. Seniors Jill Presley and Rachel Krasovsky were named to the All-Big East team. Presley led the conference in both kills per set and points per set. Krasovsky, a libero, led the conference in digs per set. Overall, the team finished 16-13 and 9-9 in the Big East.
In soccer, a mixed season for the DePaul women's team. Some progress and some disappointment. Good Day DePaul's Agit Jagannathan has details.
The DePaul women's soccer team had a tough end to last season. The Blue Demons needed a win against St. John's to qualify for the Big East tournament, but ended up losing 1-0 to the Red Storm. This is the fourth season in a row that the Blue Demons failed to make the tournament, finishing the season with an overall record of 6 wins, 7 losses, and 4 ties, and 2 5-3 in the Big East. This, despite a promising start to the season, with DePaul winning 3 of their 5 games. Head coach Michelle O'Brien spoke about the mindset before the season.
Yeah, going into the season, I think it was a brand new team. We had a lot of new players. We had 12 freshmen and 2 transfers to join our returning 16 players. So it was almost an even split of, new players versus returning players. So, I think I was unsure of how that would be. I think I was excited about the potential and having such a new group with, new energy and some youth to add to the kind of the senior experience that we did have. But, that's a lot of newness. But I think I was pleasantly surprised by how our new players came in ready for preseason. I think they reported and were, at a very respectable fitness level, were able to kind of pass the endurance test, which really set them up to have a good season.
However, they couldn't replicate their start to the season when the Big East Conference games began. They lost their first 3 matches against Marquette, Xavier, and Georgetown, which would set the tone for how the rest of their conference games would play out. The 2-1 loss against Marquette in particular was one that O'Brien singled out as a turning point in the season.
I'd say looking back, that game probably came back to haunt us in the end. I think we didn't start conference well. And that would be a game where, we should get a result at that, or could get a result, knowing you have Georgetown and Xavier up next, who are, I'd say on the top part of our conference, which are tough games.
The Blue Demons had it all to play for in their final game of the season. They needed a win to qualify for the Big East tournament, but suffered a devastating 1-0 defeat to St. John's after dominating most of the game. O'Brien reflected on that loss.
The unfortunate thing in soccer, and not like all sports, is the better team doesn't always win. And I would say that was what happened on the day. So I think that was just the biggest gut-wrenching part of that game and why it hit so hard at the end.
Midfielder and captain Ellie Mink was named to the All-Big East third team in what was her last season as a Blue Demon. But it's not all gloom and doom around the team. O'Brien spoke about some of the positives from this season.
Yeah, I'd say the positives are, a couple of things. I think, we have a lot of players coming back, a lot of young players who played a lot of important minutes that now have a ton of experience. So that's going to be really valuable moving forward. I think the group got a real close taste of what it feels like to be so close, down to the wire. 45 minutes left in the season was the difference. So I think having that and being that close makes you really hungry for more. And knowing that collectively, this team didn't feel like they should have been done playing.
For Good Day DePaul, I'm Agit Jagannathan.
And finally, a big loss for the DePaul community. Former men's basketball coach and player Joey Meyer died last month. He was 74. Meyer spent 30 years at DePaul as a player, assistant coach, and head coach. He coached from 1984 to 1997, leading the Blue Demons to 7 NCAA tournament appearances. As a player, he was the 4th leading scorer in DePaul history. Meyer was the son of legendary DePaul basketball coach Ray Meyer.
Next on Good Day DePaul, an amazing shot at a DePaul basketball game, and it did not come from a player. That story when we return.
Today, the heroes that fight day in and day out on the front lines, those who are there, innovating in real time, saving lives and answering the call to care in times of crisis. American nurses. Nurses who have been there for each and every one of us in times of crisis for more than 150 years. Nurses are the pillar of strength and the foundation of healthcare and life itself. Nurses are there the day we are born. They are there when your family is in crisis, and they are there in the end. In confronting the most catastrophic health crisis in modern history, we must remember our American nurse heroes need our support as much as we need them. To show our gratitude for their courage and ensure they receive the critical education and support services they need, donate to the Coronavirus Response Fund for Nurses today, in honor of your American nurse hero.
As we told you earlier, it's been a rough season for the DePaul men's basketball team. But at the recent home game against Creighton, DePaul Nation finally had something to cheer about. It came during a half-court shooting contest during halftime. And would you believe DePaul sophomore Connor Coy dropped a bomb from half-court? He made the big shot, earning a sweet $10,000. Coy described what happened to Fox 32 in Chicago.
They put me in a tunnel before, I was getting ready, got to feel the ball a little bit, and I just closed my eyes, visualized myself making it. So just going out there was just executing, and it's like when Babe Ruth called his shot way back when, that's how I felt.
When asked what he would do with the money, Coy simply said, "Vegas is calling."
That's all for this week's edition of Good Day DePaul. You can keep up with us by visiting our Vimeo channel at Good Day DePaul or by going to goodday.depaul.edu.
And be sure to check us out on Facebook.
And if you have any news tips, message us through the Good Day DePaul social media channels.
Thanks for watching. I'm Lena Gebhardt.
And I'm Michaela Wilson. Have a good day, DePaul.